Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the smoggy, bustling streets of 17th century London, where the air smells like coal smoke, damp wool, roasted chestnuts, and something unidentifiably unpleasant wafting up from the gutters. It's dark, but not silent. A dog barks down the alley. A fishwife curses at a thief. A night soil man lugs his sloshing bucket past your window, and there you are, brushing soot off your sleeves and wondering, with all sincerity, how anyone in this city ever managed to keep their teeth even vaguely clean. Spoiler, they mostly didn't. At least not by modern standards. You're entering a world where toothbrushes are luxury items, toothpastes are made of crushed bones, and mouthwash might involve a solution you'd rather not think too hard about. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to comment with your location and what time it is where you are right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a narrow cobblestone lane where the only light flickers from a tallow candle behind a cracked window pane. The air is thick with the kind of moisture that makes your skin feel sticky, like you've been sweating fear and fog. London in the 1600s wasn't a place that smelled fresh, but somehow people still worried about how their mouths smelled. Your teeth ache faintly. Maybe from the stale bread you chewed earlier. It's hard, not just day-old hard, but brick hard intended more for soaking in ale than biting into raw. Still, it's your meal. As you pass a row of taverns and stables, you hear someone hawk and spit. Loudly. The echo bounces off the stone like a cannonball of phlegm. You flinch. It's not even out of place. That's just what people do here. Dental hygiene, as you know it, hasn't been invented, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. People are trying, improvising, surviving. You wouldn't last 2 weeks here without feeling something sharp and unholy in your back molars. Inside a warm house, you see someone scraping their teeth with what looks like the edge of a stick. They're muttering under their breath either a prayer or a curse. It's hard to say. The fire crackles. A cat hisses from the shadows. People here clean their mouths in peculiar ways. Fire ash was popular. It's alkaline and gritty. And if you're lucky, it doesn't scratch your enamel into oblivion. You might rub it on your gums with a cloth, or with your finger. You might use soot, or crushed eggshell, or the fine white chalk scraped off the Thames side cliffs. Historians still argue whether any of this did any good, or if it just gave folks a satisfying illusion of control while their teeth rotted quietly beneath their noses. You pause at a shop window, the sort that sells gloves, ribbons, and the occasional mystery tonic. A small handwritten sign says, "Powder for teeth white and fragrant for gentle breath." It's probably chalk and cloves, or something worse, but it's selling. The rich have access to apothecaries and herbalists. The poor make do with what they have: sticks, bones, herbs, and the occasional borrowed recipe from a wise woman down the alley. You wonder if the queen's teeth smell like cinnamon or something less poetic. The streets whisper. You pass a man hunched over a bucket, scrubbing the blood off his apron. Barber-surgeons double as amateur dentists, and they pull teeth with enthusiasm and very little technique. You'll get to meet one soon enough. You keep walking. You pass someone chewing licorice root, not candy, but the actual root, fibrous and dark, meant to freshen the breath and supposedly strengthen the gums? Supposedly, nobody really knows, but it beats carrying around a mouth that smells like pickled onions and regret. A woman with a basket of herbs brushes past you, muttering about someone who lost all their front teeth from kissing the wrong man. It might be metaphor. It might be syphilis. This is London. The lines are blurry. You glance at a dog sleeping on a pile of hay beside a butcher stall. Its teeth, yellow and jagged. Aren't that different from the ones you've seen grinning out of human mouths today? You feel your own tongue explore your teeth instinctively. Are they loose? Are they soft? Are they moving? Better not to ask. A horse neighs in the distance. Someone sings a bawdy ballad nearby, and the stars are almost visible above the cloud of coal dust and fog. You push open the creaking wooden door of your lodgings, duck your head to avoid the low beam, and sit down by the fire. There, on the table, is your own makeshift toothpick shaved from a birch twig and a square of coarse linen with a dab of something grayish white. Tonight's tooth powder. You lean forward, take a breath that smells faintly of old ale and chimney smoke, and prepare to clean your teeth. Sleepy or not, hygiene waits for no one. You rub your molars with the scrap of linen, the powder gritting faintly between your teeth like sand between toes at a grimy seaside. It tastes, well, not good, but not entirely offensive either. Bitter, with a hint of chalk and something that might once have been mint. If you're lucky, you wince slightly as the cloth grazes a tender spot near your gums. Tonight's tooth cleaning ritual, if you can call it that, is a mixture of tradition, desperation, and a generous helping of imagination. Most people you pass on the street wouldn't recognize a toothbrush if it walked up and bit them. But they would understand the importance of not offending your neighbor or your lover with a mouth that smells like a plague cart. Londoners, even in the 1600s, were weirdly concerned with breath. Sure, they'd tolerate body odor that could knock out a pig. But halitosis? Now that was impolite. This is why people chewed cloves, fennel seeds, cardamom pods, anything aromatic that could override the rot setting up shop in the back of their throats. You remember the tavern earlier this afternoon? Sticky floors, laughter thick with ale, and a bowl of toothpicks by the bar. Real toothpicks. Quill ends. Bits of goose feather. Even flattened slivers of bone sharpened to a point. You watched a man dig so ferociously into his gums that you thought he might strike oil. Then he wiped the stick on his sleeve and tossed it back into the communal bowl. You didn't stay long after that. Toothpicks, for many, were the first line of defense against the feast day turkey legs still clinging to their bicuspids from last Sunday. And they weren't just for peasants either. Noblemen twirled them between their fingers like cigars, pretending they were fashionable rather than functionally desperate. And yet, a fair few still walked around with breath that could peel paint. You slide your tongue along your upper teeth. There's a notch near the gum line worn from years of scraping and scrubbing. You're not alone. Even Samuel Pepys, the famous diarist of this century, made notes about dental hygiene or the lack thereof. He once described having his tooth pulled and being unable to eat or speak without agony for days. Historians still argue whether this was standard suffering or if Pepys was just unusually dramatic. Hard to tell, but there's more than vanity at play. Infections that begin in the mouth often don't stay there. A rotten molar can end in death, blood poisoning, abscesses, fever dreams followed by funeral dirges. And yet, most people carry on brushing with whatever they can find: stale bread crusts, bits of linen, salt and vinegar rinses, or just the friction of chewing on something harder than they are. Down at the apothecary's today, you overheard a woman asking for dragon's blood. It's not what it sounds like. It's a kind of red resin, used to scent and tint tooth powders. Apparently it masks decay, maybe even heals gums. Maybe? Most of the healing is in the hope. The apothecary sold her a small tin of paste made with crushed seashells, rose petals, and something labeled essential salts. The label also had a drawing of a smiling man with all 32 teeth intact. Absolutely no chance it was based on a real person. That's the thing about this city: everyone's hustling. Everyone's got a cure. You pass a man in a long coat selling packets of Venetian powder for the preservation of the teeth. Another offers a secret French rinse to secure the breath. One even claims to have imported powdered coral from the Red Sea, ground with pearls and saffron, guaranteed to keep your gums red as rubies and twice as firm. Historians still debate whether these remedies were rooted in real knowledge or just clever grifting. Probably both. This century sits awkwardly between superstition and science. You're just as likely to find a jar labeled tooth elixir made with actual medicine as you are to find one laced with opium, lead, or sheep's urine. And yes, you heard right, urine. But that's for later. You sigh and look into the fireplace. A toothache is the kind of pain that insists on being noticed. You might be able to ignore a stubbed toe or a sore knee, but a bad molar turns your whole head into a drumbeat of misery. Earlier today, your neighbor said his cousin used soot and honey to polish her teeth. Another swears by ground brick dust mixed with gin. One woman insists on garlic cloves. You're not sure if that's for cleaning or just to keep people from standing too close. There's a certain rough tenderness to it all. People care. In their own strange way. It's easy to imagine that they didn't, that no one in the past thought about hygiene. But here you are, wiping powdered ash across your incisors, praying you won't wake up with another ache blooming in your jaw like a rotting rose. Outside, the street grows quieter. The night watchman calls the hour. A distant cough bounces off the alley walls. And you rinse your mouth with warm ale and spit it into the fire? The next morning arrives not with birdsong, but with the sound of a fishmonger shouting beneath your window and a chamber pot being emptied onto the cobblestones below. You stretch, groan, and without meaning to grit your teeth. Big mistake. There's that familiar flash of discomfort behind your right molar, like a tiny hammer tapping from the inside. You know what that means? It's toothpick time. You reach for your pocket and pull out your best goose quill toothpick, slightly frayed on one end, stained from yesterday's stew. Some people carry silver ones, real works of art shaped like little swords or daggers, but yours is functional, flexible, and almost definitely not clean. You wedge it between two teeth, wince slightly, and scrape. At the corner tavern later that morning, you sit nursing a tankard of warm, weak ale, the breakfast of champions, and watch as two men argue loudly over who has the better dental solution, the Spanish method, which involves soaking cloves in brandy, or the French way, which features powdered oyster shells and rose water. Historians still argue whether national dental pride was a real phenomenon or just an excuse for the English to complain about the French. You lean back, letting the voices blend into the background hum of London's chaos. A wench passes with a tray of boiled eggs and yesterday's bread, and you decide against both. You're not in the mood to wedge more food into crevices your quill can't reach. As a child, you were told never to smile too wide in public, not for modesty's sake, but because it might reveal too much missing molars, blackened canines, or worse, the unmistakable glint of rot. You recall your aunt's wedding, when her new husband laughed and revealed a row of teeth like crumbling gravestones. He was rich enough to afford wine, but not dental care. Or maybe that was his dental care. Some swore by red wine rinses to numb the gums and kill mouth-borne evils. Others believed that only strong tobacco could cure tooth decay, if not the disease. Then at least your awareness of it. And yet, for all the horror stories, people tried. Toothpicks weren't just afterthoughts, they were part of the meal. Elegant dinner guests would pick delicately between bites, not just for cleanliness, but as a status symbol. Carrying a personal toothpick signaled that you were genteel enough to care and wealthy enough to afford wasteful luxury. You think of the merchant you saw last week with an ivory toothpick clipped to his belt. He cleaned his teeth with it while negotiating a price on silk ribbons. Every scrape punctuated his disdain. He closed the deal. You wonder if the toothpick helped. There's also an older woman down by Fleet Street who sharpens chicken bones and sells them by the dozen for the same purpose. You tried one once, it splintered halfway through and got stuck between your molars. Never again. A man near you in the tavern belches, then pulls out a length of horsehair tied to a twig and begins flossing his teeth. It's hypnotic, in a revolting kind of way. You've seen worse. One fellow used a feather shaft. Another preferred sewing thread dipped in salt water. Desperation and innovation go hand in hand when it comes to oral hygiene in 17th century London. Of course, not all toothpicks are created equal. Some are soaked in vinegar. Some are rubbed in charcoal. One gentleman, you hear, uses sticks soaked in lemon oil imported citrus. No less. Exotic and a little acidic. Probably worse for enamel, but delightful for bragging. Toothpicks also served a secondary purpose that kept you from chewing your fingernails, or at least gave you something to do while waiting for the painkillers to kick in. Painkillers being, of course, ale, or gin, or prayer. Historians still argue whether oral hygiene was more effective in wealthy homes or poorer ones. The rich had access to ingredients coral, cloves, imported oils, but they also had sugar. Loads of it. Sweetened wines, candied fruits, marzipan, sugar plums. The poor, by contrast, may not have had any dental luxuries, but they also didn't spend their days sucking on sugar sticks. Irony, it seems. Had teeth. Back outside, you wander past a market stall selling quills, combs, and soap. One sign reads birch picks, soft wood for gentle gums, 2 pence a bundle. You pause, consider, then move on. Your goose quill might be stained and a little mushy, but it's yours. It's survived meals, fights, and 2 winters. You'll keep it a little longer. As you walk, a group of children run past, laughing, one with a smear of something dark around his lips. You hope it's treacle. He grins. You wince. Somewhere behind you, a bell tolls, not a church bell. It's the dentist, or rather the barber-surgeon, advertising his services with a clang. You'll see him soon, but not yet. For now, you stick the quill back in your pocket, Smile a half smile at the sky, and thank the heavens that, for the moment, your teeth are still in your head. Mostly. By midday, the air is thicker smog and the soot mixing with the sharper smells of tannery runoff, horse sweat, and that unmistakable tang of river rot drifting up from the Thames. You duck beneath a swinging butcher's sign, step around a sleeping drunk, and find yourself in front of your regular apothecary's crooked little shop. Inside, it smells like a garden that's been set on fire. Dried herbs hang in bundles from the ceiling, and behind the counter stands a man who looks like he's either 40 or 400, depending on how closely you inspect his teeth. He greets you with a nod and a wheezy chuckle, his grin missing 2 canines and 1 eye. Need something for your gums, he asks. Before you say a word? Of course you do. He offers you a new blend of powder made from crushed charcoal, dried rosemary, and powdered deer antler. He insists it's extremely cleansing. You're not convinced, but you're curious. You ask him if anyone else has tried it. Only my brother, he says, and his teeth fell out, but not because of this. Mind you, you buy it anyway. Back at home, you stir a bit of the dusty mixture into a drop of water and dip a frayed linen rag into the gray paste. You press it to your teeth and rub gently, the way the barber-surgeon once showed you. It's gritty, grainy, and oddly warm. You're not sure if that's the rosemary or the early signs of chemical warfare happening inside your mouth. But this is how it goes. No one uses the same method twice. Everyone is guessing. Cleaning your teeth in 17th century London is part habit, part superstition, and entirely an exercise in tolerance. You spit into the fire again, the gray foam sizzling faintly on the logs. Your neighbor downstairs swears by ashes. Not just any ashes, he uses burnt bread crust. Says the yeast gives it a softness. He also adds crushed laurel leaves and a pinch of salt. And when he's feeling fancy, crumbled lavender heads for scent and charm. Of course, historians still argue whether any of these additives had actual medical value, or if they just made the mouth feel busy and the mind feel safe. As you lean back in your chair, savoring the faint numbness in your gums, you remember the strange tale the apothecary told last week. A noblewoman, newly arrived from Portugal, who claimed that rinsing her mouth with fresh morning urine gave her teeth a shine brighter than pearls. You nearly choked when he said it. He didn't flinch. And yes, as horrid as it sounds, it wasn't uncommon. The ammonia in stale urine acts as a cleaning agent, and even ancient Romans were rumored to bottle it for laundry and hygiene. The idea trickled down quite literally through the centuries, but Portuguese urine, that was the premium version, supposedly more fragrant and less aggressive, if there's such a thing. The wealthy paid handsomely for it. The poor, well, the poor had their own. You haven't tried it yet, but in this city, where mold grows faster than bread and a good smile might mean marriage or misery, you never say never. The apothecary once hinted at more than powders and rinses. He spoke of toothworms. Yes, you heard that right, actual worms living inside your teeth. According to him and many others, these invisible creatures burrowed into the bone, feasting on sweetness and spreading decay. If you hear a toothache pulsing, that's the worm squirming. He sells oil of clove to kill them, a thick amber liquid that burns the tongue and numbs the gums. You've used it before. It works. Or maybe it just makes everything else so tingly that you forget the pain. Either way, you dab a little behind your molars and let the numbness spread. You think of your cousin, who had 2 front teeth pulled last winter. The barber surgeon did it with iron pincers and a boot on her chest. She screamed so loud the hen stopped laying for 3 days. She now swears by the coral tooth powder sold at the docks, shipped from the Indies, laced with cinnamon, and stamped with a crown. Fit for queens, it says, though whether it does anything is anyone's guess. It tastes like chalk and sea air. The debate rages powder or paste cloth or stick urine or ash. Historians still haven't agreed on which method was most effective. Probably none of them, but maybe all of them, depending on who you ask. A boy passes by outside your window, balancing a bucket of water and humming a tune with missing notes, probably due to missing teeth. You smile at the thought and feel a faint twinge near your molars again. Is it pain? Is it the worm? You add a pinch more clove oil just to be sure. Later that afternoon, you head toward the square where the barber surgeon sets up shop on Thursdays. The man is a walking paradox, half healer, half butcher, dressed in a leather apron streaked with fluids you don't ask about. His table is neatly arranged with razors, scissors, lancets, leeches, and, tucked beside them with no special reverence, a gleaming pair of tooth-extracting forceps. He spots you and nods. Tooth troubling you, he asks, already rummaging through his box of powders and cloth strips. You shake your head and lie, just looking. In truth, your tooth is troubling you. A dull ache, like a warning bell, ringing somewhere deep beneath the bone. But not yet. You're not ready. You're not desperate enough for the iron clamp, the boot on the chest, the crack of bone like a green branch snapping. You watch as another man not quite old, not quite sober, leans back in the barber's chair. He opens his mouth wide and screams before the tool even touches him. The extraction takes seconds. The screaming lasts longer. When it's over, the barber holds up a molar the size of a walnut. Black at the root, you flinch involuntarily. He tosses it into a tin pail. It clinks among others. Back in the 17th century, teeth aren't treated delicately. They're yanked, scorched, powdered, soaked, or left alone to rot with quiet determination. Pain is expected. Blood is normal. Infections are frequent. Success is survival. Still, you ask about tooth powders. The barber gestures to a pouch at the corner of the table. Clove and burnt antler, he says. Tightens the gums. Keeps them from falling out. You imagine your gums slowly receding, like a tide drawing back on the shore, leaving your teeth stranded like broken shells. You buy the pouch. He also offers a mouth rinse boiled sage, steeped in vinegar. It smells like a salad gone bad. You politely decline. Behind him, a sign reads, haircuts, bloodletting, tooth drawing, hot cupping, inquire within. London in this era is a buffet of treatments, and you never quite know what you're getting. Comfort, comedy, or catastrophe. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons actually knew what they were doing, or if they were simply filling a role nobody else wanted. Either way, they were essential, especially when the ache got worse. When the jaw swelled, when the fever came, you pass by a boy clutching his cheek, crying softly, his mother whispering, "We'll find a good one, I promise." You know the odds are 50-50. If he's lucky, the tooth comes out. If he's not, the infection might take him. That night, you inspect your own teeth again by candlelight. There's a shadow at the gum line, a soft spot on the lower molar. You rub it gently, feel a twinge, and pause. You could go back. Let the barber take it, or you could try the new powder. Clove and antler. You dip your cloth in water, then in the powder. It smells like an old church and a dead bonfire. You rub it along your teeth, slow and steady. It's not pleasant, but it's not painful. You can live with that. In the firelight, you remember the story of your grandfather's last tooth. He kept it in his head until the very end, black as coal, sharp as a knife. He claimed it outlasted 2 wives in a bout of plague. You're not aiming for that level of commitment, but still you respect the legacy. Outside, someone sings an off-key ballad about a sailor and a bucket of eels. A dog barks. The night rolls in. You rinse your mouth with warm ale, swish it twice, and spit into the hearth. It hisses like a snake. Somewhere inside, the clove is numbing your nerves. Or maybe it's just the alcohol. Tooth pain in this century isn't a question of if, it's when. You get ahead of it if you can, bargain with it if you must, and when the time comes, you pull. But not tonight. Tonight, you keep your teeth. The following morning, you wake earlier than you'd like, not from sunlight, but from the distant clang of church bells and the more immediate sensation of something gritty still clinging to the edges of your molars. Last night's tooth powder has left its mark, both in your memory and in your mouth. You sit up, stretch, and glance at your reflection in the fogged tin mirror. Your gums look slightly less angry than yesterday. Encouraging, though your breath still smells like someone boiled cloves in a fireplace. Less encouraging. You chew slowly on a piece of bread, trying to soften it with saliva before attempting to bite. It's hard as a roof tile. Someone once told you chewing helps scrub the teeth. Maybe that's true. Or maybe it just breaks them faster. Later, you stroll through the market square where you're met with a barrage of noise, stink, and life. A man balances live geese on his shoulders. A child chases a cabbage down a muddy slope. And over by the baker's, a peddler in a patched blue coat is shouting the virtues of his newest product, mint leaves from the colonies. For your breath and your beloved's, you walk over. He offers you a sprig of something vaguely green. You nibble it. It's bitter and a little sweet, with a faintly peppery sting. Is it mint possibly? Or some cousin of it? The peddler claims it banishes mouth demons. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles perfectly intact teeth, suspiciously white. They must be false. Dental deception was a thriving art. Even in the 1600s, people were faking their smiles. False teeth could be carved from ivory, bone, or wood, and fitted sometimes poorly into the mouth with wire, wax, or hope. You once met a man who wore a full ivory upper row. When he spoke, it sounded like he was clinking coins. The teeth clicked with every syllable. And when he sneezed, one shot out into his soup. You turned down the second course. Still, the desire to appear clean ran deep, especially among the emerging middle class. These were the merchants, clerks, and artisans who couldn't afford noble titles but could afford to imitate noble habits, including pretending they had decent dental care. Back in your own neighborhood, You pass a woman sitting outside her window with a small bowl of ashes. She's gently rubbing her teeth with a cloth wrapped around her finger. You nod to her. She nods back, a gap-toothed smile as wide as the Thames. She points to the bowl. "Birch ash," she says. "Keeps 'em white. Does it work, you ask?" She shrugs. "Worked better before I lost the front 3. You both laugh. Historians still argue whether ash actually cleaned teeth or just eroded them more slowly than other methods. Some evidence suggests birch ash was mildly antiseptic. Others believe it simply covered the smell. But ash was cheap and available. And if you were too poor for coral or crushed pearls, you used what your fire gave you. Another man you once knew used soot. Not just any soot, he collected it from the backs of chimneys, scraped it down, and mixed it with salt. His breath smelled like salted bacon and coal dust. But his teeth still in his head. There's also the friend who swore by powdered brick ground until fine and pink, then rubbed directly onto the teeth. "Gives 'em color," he said. You never had the heart to tell him the color it gave was gums bleeding profusely. You duck into a narrow alley, the kind that disappears between buildings like a secret. Here, it's quieter. You pull out a piece of licorice root black, twisted, bitter, and begin to chew. It's oddly calming. Licorice was said to freshen breath, ease digestion, and strengthen gums. It's also chewy enough to pull loose teeth straight from the socket, if you're not careful. You remember hearing of someone who cleaned their teeth with chewed parsley, rolled in salt. Another who swore by apple cider vinegar. One brave soul insisted raw garlic clove, rubbed on the teeth, drove out the decay. It also drove away most social contact. This city, filthy as it is, holds countless little rituals. Brushing, rinsing, picking, powdering. They didn't have dental charts or fluoride, but they had time, and a strange, enduring hope that maybe, just maybe, they could keep their smiles a few years longer. Even the clergy got involved. A sermon last week mentioned the moral value of clean breath, how sweet speech begins with a clean mouth. Some took it literally. Others took offense. You spit the licorice root into a nearby gutter. It lands next to something that might be a dead rat or a very tired hat. You don't inspect it too closely. A child skips past you, singing a rhyme, powdered bone and salted ash. Make your smile as bright as cash. You chuckle, then touch a hand to your jaw. No sharp pain. Not yet. No swelling. No throbbing. You breathe a quiet sigh of relief. And just for good measure, you rinse your mouth with the last of your ale. Warm. Faintly sour. But comforting. Tonight, you'll sleep with the new powder tucked beneath your pillow. Not for protection, but to remind you this is a fight you take one scrape at a time. As twilight settles once again over the creaking rooftops of London, you sit by the hearth, staring into the flickering orange light and holding a stick of dried clove in your hand. It's a bit like chewing wood mixed with cinnamon and suffering, but it beats waking up with your teeth feeling loose. Or worse, clicking when you talk. You gently press the clove stick against a tender spot in your mouth and let the numbing begin. The sensation is oddly comforting, like holding ice against a bruise, only it smells a bit more like a Christmas pudding. You exhale slowly. Your gums seem quieter. This clove trick isn't yours alone. Clove oil, whether applied neat or mixed into powders, has long been a staple in the apothecary's cabinet. Historians still argue whether it originated from India or Indonesia, but by the 1600s, cloves had made their way into nearly every part of a Londoner's life. Meat preservation, perfume, plague warding, and yes, oral care. But cloves weren't cheap. A single ounce could cost a laborer half a week's wages. So you make do with what you can find. Dried sticks, scraps, oil-soaked linen. You once saw a man at a tavern dabbing clove oil onto a piece of stale bread and chewing it slowly, not for the flavor, but for the relief. It's amazing what passes for medicine when your options are limited. Tonight, though, you've decided to try something a bit more daring. The woman down by the dock, some say she's a witch. Others say she's just sold you a tiny paper packet of coral dust and moon-crushed pearl. Probably a lie. Almost definitely not pearl. But it's pinkish and smells like dried roses and chalk. You mix it carefully with a few drops of warm water and smear the paste along your molars. The texture is grainy, and the taste, well, the taste is like licking the bottom of a perfume drawer. But the effect, not bad. Your breath smells faintly floral, your gums tingle, and your tongue doesn't recoil in horror. That's a win by 17th century standards. Back in your childhood, you remember your grandmother swearing by salt and honey as a cure-all. Rub it on the gums, she'd say, and the rot will flee. You tried it once. The honey was lovely. The salt less so. It left your gums redder than a martyr's robe. Still, folk remedies persist. You once heard someone describe a remedy involving mashed strawberries and ashes. Another swore by dried sage rubbed directly onto the teeth. There's even talk of people chewing pine needles, though that sounds less like hygiene and more like a dare. The strange thing is, even among the educated, there's no consensus. One physician insists vinegar damages the enamel. Another recommends it twice daily. Some advocate rinsing with wine, others with cold tea. Historians still debate whether early dental advice was grounded in medical observation or just alchemy with a better vocabulary. You lean back in your chair, the paste drying slightly in your mouth, and think about the strange balance people strike between pain and pride. Take the powdered coral, for instance, imported from who knows where, ground to dust, and sold at a premium. People smear it on their teeth not just to clean, but to feel elegant, as if a rosy smile made you immune to the reek of the Thames. Appearance matters especially here. Courtiers at Whitehall paint their faces white with lead, wear wigs thick with powder, and smile with teeth as black as a burnt loaf. The contrast is striking, and a little tragic. You heard once about a nobleman who had a custom blend made from pearl dust, nutmeg, and vinegar of roses. He insisted it kept his breath sweet as a sonnet. He also lost 3 teeth in one winter. But the illusion mattered more than the pain. You swallow carefully, aware of the graininess still clinging to your tongue. Somewhere outside, a bell tolls softly. Perhaps someone's passed, or perhaps it's just marking the hour. Either way, you let the sound settle around you. A knock at the door startles you. It's your neighbor's daughter holding a small cloth bundle. She says her father sent her. He's heard you're experimenting with tooth powders and wanted to offer his own, made from crushed fennel seeds and ground snail shells. You accept it with a nod and a quiet thanks. The bundle is warm from her hands. Once she leaves, you unfold it and sniff. It smells earthy, Sweet, with a strange mineral edge. Snail shell. Who knew you dip a finger in and rub a bit on your front teeth? It's softer than most powders, almost silky. You wonder if it's a placebo or if the snail knew something you didn't. These nightly rituals, as odd as they are, bring a strange comfort. Not because they always work, but because they mean trying. They mean hope. And in a world where your life can be undone by a single infected tooth, hope is half the battle. You blow out your candle and lie back on the straw-stuffed mattress, mouth tasting faintly of rose, fennel, and chalk. You smile. I'm still here. Still chewing. The next day dawns gray and damp, as London prefers it. You rise with a jaw that feels okay. Not perfect, but acceptable. No fresh throbbing, no ominous swelling. Just that constant background awareness that your teeth exist and could turn on you at any moment. You make your way toward the bakery for a bit of bread, still careful to chew on the left side. The baker smiles, revealing 3 teeth total, and hands you a crusty heel that might double as a building material. You accept it with the grim enthusiasm of someone who knows the bread is less for nourishment and more for exfoliating the molars. Later, back home, you sit at your small wooden table and inspect your dental kit of frayed cloth, a twig with one chewed end, a packet of yesterday's coral powder, a tiny bottle of clove oil, and new today, a lump of wig powder. Yes, wig powder. You remember the barber-surgeon's apprentice mentioning this yesterday in passing. Some folks, he said, used scented wig powder on their teeth. Not for cleaning, but for the smell. Think of it like 17th century breath spray if breath spray came in chalky form and shared a shelf with lice powder. You pinch some between your fingers. It's floral, dusty, and vaguely lemon-scented. You dab a little on your cloth and, because this is London and you've tried worse, begin rubbing it gently across your front teeth. The taste is appalling. Your mouth instantly goes dry, like you lick the inside of a flour sack. You cough once and dab your tongue with ale. Still, it smells better than most of your other options. It makes sense in a strange way. Wig powder was a luxury, perfumed and dyed for fashionable heads. If it worked for scalps, why not mouths? Historians still debate whether this practice was common or the domain of a few particularly desperate dandies. But you've heard it repeated more than once. You believe it. You try not to inhale too deeply as you scrub. While you work, you think of the fine line between dental care and vanity. Powdered teeth were, for some, a social requirement. A gentle scent on the breath, a white gleam when smiling, these things mattered. At court, a foul mouth could lose you favor. Among merchants, it could cost you business. Even poets, those unwashed dreamers, made sure their teeth were tolerable enough not to offend a patron. Of course, not everyone had the luxury of choosing their method. Poorer Londoners had simpler tools. Willow twigs, chewed to a fray, vinegar rinses made with stale ale, bone dust from soup leftovers, ground and sprinkled on cloth. You once saw a woman brush her teeth with the fibrous edge of a dried fish fin. Whether it helped is unclear, but her breath didn't knock you flat, which counts as success. There's also a trick your old uncle taught you. He'd boil pine bark, cool it, and use the broth as a mouth rinse. Claimed it made his gums firm and his teeth glow. You tried it once. It tasted like moldy furniture. Never again. You reach for the clove oil and dab a little on a splintered chicken bone. You use it to trace gently between your teeth, dislodging whatever the bread has left behind. It's a meditative process, slow, methodical, a form of prayer. Really? One part cleanliness, one part superstition. Somewhere in the city, a bell rings an early funeral, perhaps, or a public execution. London offers both daily, you spit into a bucket and inspect your handiwork. Your teeth aren't white, but they don't look actively haunted. That's a win. You wipe your hands and walk outside for fresh air, if you can call it that. The Thames lumbers by, carrying with it the secrets and stains of 1,000 chamber pots. You breathe through your nose. A pamphlet seller nearby shouts the title of a new medical tract. On the humors of the mouth and the warding of miasma, you buy a copy for a farthing. Inside, it recommends rinsing your mouth with vinegar steeped in rose hips and peppercorns, followed by a gargle of egg whites and alum. You make a note never to try that. Still, you're impressed by the effort, even in a city riddled with plague, rot, and rats. People are writing, printing, and sharing knowledge on how to keep teeth from falling out. It gives you hope. And so, back home again. You settle near the fire. You dip your cloth in vinegar, swipe your tongue across your teeth, and try to remember a time before they all started aching. Maybe childhood. Maybe never. The wig powder sits in its tin, waiting. You may try it again tomorrow. Or not. For tonight, your mouth is clean enough. Your gums are quiet, and your breath smells faintly of lemons and smoke. You'll take it. It's just past dusk when you find yourself chewing absently on a stick of licorice root, standing outside a bakery that smells far better than anyone in line. You're not here for the bread tonight, you're eavesdropping. Two men are deep in conversation about a nobleman who, they claim, just had his entire row of upper teeth replaced. With wood. Cherry wood, one of them says knowingly, as if it matters. Maple, insists the other. Polished with beeswax? You try not to snort too loudly. You've heard the tale before rich men with money to burn on replacement teeth, fitted like puzzle pieces into their jaws. It's not exactly common, but in 17th century London, if you had coin, you could convince someone to carve you a smile. False teeth were a gamble, carved from ivory, wood, or sometimes even bone. They were fitted into the mouth with wires, pins, or just the friction of wishful thinking. Most were uncomfortable. Some were dangerous. A few even worked for a while. You once met a woman who wore a front tooth carved from sheep bone. It was a little too large. Gave her a slight lisp, but she swore by it. Better to lisp than to whistle through the gap. She told you. Still, not everyone could afford such dental luxury. Most had to rely on the teeth they were born with and all the strange, desperate rituals that came with trying to keep them. Take chewing sticks, for example. They're everywhere. Hawthorn twigs, birch twigs, even lavender stems if you're feeling floral. Chew them. Fray the ends. Then rub the fibers across your teeth like a primitive brush. Some swear by their cleaning power. Others just like having something to chew that isn't rat-tailed bread. You carry one, too. A bit of willow, stripped and smoothed. Slightly bitter. It tastes faintly medicinal, and it helps ease your jaw when the aches start to whisper. And then there's the chicken bone trick. Not your favorite, admittedly. But the bone, once cleaned and sharpened to a dull point, makes for a passable tool. You've used one before. Carefully. It scrapes well between teeth, especially after a tough cut of meat, but it splinters easily and nothing ruins your night like a sliver of poultry wedged under your gum. You think back to a friend, a butcher's apprentice, who kept an entire roll of bones tucked into a pouch at his belt. One for picking, one for scraping, one he claimed for ceremony. You never asked what ceremony involved. Probably best not to. Still, you respect the commitment. Inside your pocket now is your own daily kit, the willow twig, a sachet of clove powder, your goose quill toothpick, and the ever-diminishing cloth square you use for scrubbing. Not quite modern dentistry, but it gets the job done. Back at home, you sit by the hearth, rolling a piece of licorice root between your molars and thinking about that nobleman with the wooden teeth. He probably can't chew a turnip without fear. Probably can't even smile without wondering if he'll lose a slat halfway through a joke. There's a kind of dignity in keeping your own teeth, no matter how stained or sore. You reach for the twig again and begin your nightly ritual. Rub, scrape, rinse with warm ale, spit into the fire. The room fills with the soft, familiar hiss of embers reacting to whatever strange concoction you've created in your mouth. Historians still argue whether these methods, twigs, bones, roots did anything at all. Some say yes, citing the mechanical benefit of scraping away food debris. Others argue that without modern paste and proper brushes, the effort was largely symbolic. Maybe they're both right. Symbolism is still effort, hope wrapped in habit, and then, of course, there's breath. You lean back in your chair and remember the monk who once said that foul breath is the whisper of sin. Harsh. Maybe. But it stuck with you. In a city where smells define spaces, fresh bread, rotting meat, chamber pot steam keeping your mouth pleasant is a form of social survival, and perhaps even moral cleanliness. Depending on the preacher, you rinse once more with the splash of cider vinegar, eyes watering slightly from the sting. You cough, then smile through the tang. You'll sleep tonight with nothing more dramatic than a dry mouth and a clean conscience. And perhaps the faint satisfaction of knowing your teeth, though imperfect, are still your own. The morning air hangs thick with fog and chimney smoke as you step outside, mouth still tasting faintly of vinegar and last night's licorice root. The cobblestones glisten from a late drizzle, and the sky above London is its usual color wet parchment. You nod to the fishwife with the crooked grin, half her smile missing, but no less bright for it, and begin your walk toward the apothecary near St. Giles. He's rumored to carry something new, something strong, something exotic. And you're curious. The shop is smaller than you expected, squeezed between a candlemaker's and a tavern that always smells of boiled mutton. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of old herbs, wax, and something sharp, maybe vinegar, maybe regret. The apothecary himself is younger than most, with inky fingers and a distracted manner. You ask about dental powders. He nods once, pulls a small wooden drawer open, and produces a vial labeled in looping. Suspiciously French script, poudre de perle et clou de girofle. Pearl powder and clove. You arch a brow. Real pearl. He smiles without showing teeth. Real enough. You buy it anyway. Back home, you open the vial and peer inside. The powder is almost silky, a faint glimmer catching the candlelight. You dip a damp cloth in, rub it against your front teeth, and instantly feel the familiar burn of clove and something finer, like powdered glass. You grimace. Beauty, it seems, is still pain. But this was the fashion among the wealthy. False refinement through rare ingredients. Pearl dust, coral, crushed rubies for color, they claimed, and even ground alabaster. Some nobles went so far as to sweeten their breath with gold leaf-infused tonics. You can barely afford the pearl imitation. Still, the pursuit of a better smile isn't about money. It's about control. In a city that smells perpetually like soot and sewage, your mouth is one of the few places you can attempt to keep clean. You spit delicately into your fire's ashes and wonder if your smile could fool a merchant into giving you better terms, or a landlord into granting a few extra days on rent. Or maybe just fool yourself into thinking you've got some say in how the world treats you. Later, as the day turns to dusk, you visit a friend, an old sailor who lost 3 teeth to a storm and 4 more to rum. He grins through the gaps, lights a pipe, and tells you he used to brush with crushed seashells mixed into whale oil. Kept the rot at bay, he claims, and kept the ladies interested. You're skeptical. Still, he hands you a small pouch of the mixture to try. You thank him, though you plan to let it sit politely on your shelf for a few weeks before quietly disposing of it. At dinner, you notice a neighbor chewing something thoughtfully between bites. Not food, not gum. When you ask, he pulls out a strip of linen stained a pale green. Mint and salt. He explains, wrap it around the tooth, tuck it in the cheek, let it sit an hour. He offers you one. You try it. It stings like a reprimand, then numbs to a manageable tingle. Not bad. You may do it again. Historians still argue whether such cheek-wrapping methods originated with sailors, monks, or desperate grandmothers. The practice appears in scattered records, often described as herbal poultices for the inner mouth, which sounds fancier than salt rag in the cheek. You rinse with warm water and honey, a trick you picked up from a traveling tinker. He claimed it soothed the demons beneath the molars. More likely, it just dulled the pain with sugar and sentiment. That night, as you sit by the fire and file down a new willow twig for tomorrow, you think about all the effort you've poured into keeping your teeth intact. All the scraping, rinsing, chewing, dabbing, all the powders and rituals. You wonder if people in centuries to come will find these habits absurd. You suspect they will, but they're yours. And tonight, you'll rest with a faint clove burn on your tongue, pearl dust on your gums, and the comforting ache of teeth that still belong to you. Tonight, as rain taps softly against the leaded window panes, you sit at your table with a candle burning low and your nightly tooth-scrubbing ritual laid out before you. The tools are humble linen cloth, a sliver of licorice root, and your newest obsession, a tiny jar of crushed myrrh and sage. You dip your cloth into the mixture, which smells like an old church in a bitter garden, and begin the slow task of rubbing the paste along your gums. It's gritty and earthy and somehow spiritual, as if your mouth is confessing sins through the back of your molars. You've read, or rather, overheard that myrrh was used by the ancient Egyptians. They embalmed their dead with it and swished it around in their mouths to preserve the living. The irony doesn't escape you. In 17th century London, the line between living and decaying was always thin, especially when it came to teeth. Sage, on the other hand, is one of the apothecary's darlings, not just for cooking, but for cleaning. It was believed to strengthen the gums and purify the breath. Some even called it tooth herb and recommended it steeped in vinegar or chewed raw. You tried it raw once. It made your tongue feel like it was wearing wool. But combined with myrrh, the sage seems civil, like two old enemies learning to get along for the sake of your mouth. As you scrub, you think of the dentist you met 3 winters ago, a man with hands too big for his tools and eyes like a hawk watching meat. He boasted of using a secret formula made from ash, mint, and the breath of a maiden. You didn't ask what that meant. You didn't want to know. Historians still debate whether many of these so-called dental specialists were charlatans or genuine pioneers. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the middle, floating like a molar in a mug of vinegar. Outside, the streets are quieting. The cries of the fishmongers and knife sharpeners fade into the drizzle. You spit into the hearth again, this time with a little more ceremony. The fire hisses in approval. You rinse with warm water steeped in thyme, another herb with antibacterial lore attached to it. It tastes like regret and leaf mold, but leaves your mouth oddly soothed, like a lullaby for your gums. You remember a woman you met during Lent who swore by parsley and mint poultices wrapped in linen. She'd fold them neatly and press them against her cheeks while praying, whether it was the herbs or the prayers doing the work. She didn't care. Her breath always smelled like springtime and stern advice. You've tried parsley. It worked. Kind of, until it turned brown in your teeth and someone asked if you'd been chewing weeds again. Still, you admire her devotion. You dry your mouth with the corner of your sleeve and sit back, letting the flavors fade from your tongue one by one. There's a faint sweetness now, probably from the licorice you chewed earlier, lingering like a memory you don't want to brush away just yet. Across the room, your pouch of ash and bone dust sits untouched. You used it once this week already. Moderation is key lest your enamel wear thin and your teeth grow fragile like eggshells. You once knew a man who brushed 3 times a day, obsessed with keeping his teeth white. He used vinegar, salt, even scraped them with a file. His smile was stunning for a time. Then one by one, his teeth began to chip, then crumble, until he was left with a jaw that clicked and gums that bled. Vanity has a cost. You glance at your own reflection in the darkened window. It's faint, barely more than a suggestion, but the outline of your face, the slight parting of your lips, and the dim sparkle of your front teeth, it's enough. You smile. There's a quiet pride in knowing you've kept them. Not perfect, not painless, but present. And while the rain taps on and the fire sighs into glowing embers, you lean back, fingers resting lightly on your jaw, and let yourself drift. Tonight, you will sleep with a clean mouth, a light tongue, and the distant taste of herbs echoing in your breath. A new day rises behind clouds the color of pewter. You wake to the sound of hooves clattering over wet cobblestone and the distinct creak of a cart heavy with vegetables or possibly corpses, depending on the neighborhood. You sit up, tongue running a curious patrol across your teeth. No new pain, no sour taste. The ache that haunted your molars last week is now no more than a ghost tapping politely from the attic of your jaw. You take it as a good sign. Downstairs. Your landlord is arguing with a pipe vendor. Something about prices and moldy stems. You slip out quietly and make your way toward the herbalist's stall at the eastern end of the market. She's always there early, with dried bundles of lavender, rosemary, and something she only calls good root. Today, she has a new concoction, a tiny wax-sealed jar labeled Dentistre's Secret. You raise an eyebrow. What's in it, you ask? She winks. The secret's part of the charm? You buy it anyway. Back home, curiosity wins. You crack the wax and lift the lid. Inside a dark green paste, thick and herbal, with a scent like boiled moss and burnt licorice. You hesitate, then dab your cloth into the paste and rub it along your gums. The taste is horrifying, like a wet hedge set on fire by a drunk apothecary. But it works, or feels like it does. There's a mild numbing sensation, a faint tingling, a curious warmth blooming near the gum line. You sit by the window, watching the street below while your mouth slowly turns into a botanical garden of sensation. Historians still argue whether any of these secret formulas were based on actual medicinal chemistry or just elaborate fairy tales. Some of them worked. Some were mostly alcohol. A few were mostly hope. You watch a chimney sweep pass by, grinning with soot-streaked teeth, and wonder what he uses, or if he uses anything at all. Maybe the soot is his powder. Your thoughts drift back to breath, the other half of dental dignity. No matter how clean your teeth looked, if your mouth smelled like pickled turnips and candle wax. Your social prospects were limited. And so the breath fresheners, rosewater rinses, clove-studded orange peels, cinnamon chews, fennel seeds. One gentleman swore by rinsing with mead. Another claimed chewing lemon peels softened his gums and his enemies. Some ladies were known to tuck mint leaves beneath their tongues at court, giving the illusion of sweetness even when their mouths were, quite literally, rotting. You've tried lemon peel. It burns. And then it burns more. But afterward, your breath smells like something between citrus and desperation, which, in this city, is practically perfume. You step outside, just in time to hear a street preacher shouting that vanity leads to sin, and that those who care for their teeth more than their souls will have neither in the end. He's missing several of his own, which undercuts the message a bit. Still, it reminds you of another fringe belief that toothaches were divine punishment for pride, for smiling too widely, for speaking ill of your neighbors, for laughing in church. You once met a woman who refused to treat her tooth pain out of spiritual discipline. Said she earned the rot. You didn't argue. Her breath could have peeled wallpaper, had wallpaper been invented yet. You pass a vendor selling bundles of sage and thyme, wrapped in ribbon. For prayers, he says. For tea, says another. But you know better. Many wrap them around a warmed stone and press them to the jaw to soothe aching teeth. The warmth draws out the pain, or at least draws your attention away from it. You buy a bundle. Back at home, you wrap the herbs in a rag, warm them near the hearth, and press the bundle gently to your cheek. The smell rises green, earthy, calming. You sit like that for a long time, breathing, savoring, hoping. Tooth care in your world is never simple, never certain. It's a patchwork of remedies, warnings, folk tales, and blind experimentation. It's both daily ritual and quiet rebellion against rot, poverty, and time itself. And for tonight, at least, it seems to have worked. You rinse once more with warm ale, dab your teeth with the last bit of green paste, and rest your jaw on folded arms as the fire cracks and the city exhales. Night falls again like soot from a chimney, slow, soft, and slightly choking. You sit beside the hearth with your feet propped on a stool and your jaw resting in your palm, listening to the creak of the rafters above and the faint murmur of a couple arguing 2 floors down. Something about sausages or socks. It's hard to tell. You're not thinking about that, though. You're thinking about your teeth. Not out of pain tonight, thankfully. More out of contemplation. Wondering, as always, how something so small can command so much of your life. One tooth misbehaving and suddenly your meals, your sleep, your temper, even your prayers shift orbit. You reach for your pouch of fennel seeds, your current favorite breath freshener, and pop a few between your teeth. You chew slowly, letting the flavor roll across your tongue. Sweet, sharp, vaguely medicinal. It's better than mint, less aggressive, more comforting. People used fennel for everything: cooking, healing, chasing off evil spirits, and, of course, keeping your breath from frightening livestock. You remember a traveling performer who used to chew fennel and cardamom seeds before each performance. Said it helped him project. Nothing kills a monologue like mouth rot, he told you. You never forgot that line. Fennel also helped with digestion, they say. So it had the double advantage of making your breath pleasant and ensuring your audience didn't suffer if you were performing in close quarters. Tonight, your only audience is the crackling fire and a small wooden cup filled with your newest experiment, crushed charcoal mixed with honey and a hint of orange peel. You've been saving this one. You dip your cloth into the cup, rub gently along your molars, and feel the strange combination of grit and sweetness. It's not unpleasant. The charcoal scours, the honey soothes, the orange peel. You're not sure what it does. Smells nice, though. This mixture was suggested by a midwife you met 3 months ago. She delivered twins with one hand and stirred a dental paste with the other. Claimed it keeps the rot quiet. You believed her. Historians still argue whether charcoal had real antiseptic properties, or if it was just an abrasive cleaner that happened not to poison you. Either way, it's popular. From the poorest servant to the most powdered nobleman, charcoal found its way into mouths all over London. You remember reading or perhaps overhearing a curious belief that black powder made white teeth? There's poetry in that, though probably not science. Across the city, people are performing similar rituals tonight. Scraping, chewing, rinsing, praying. 1,000 variations on a theme of please don't let them fall out. Even the well-to-do, with their servants in silverware, worry about their teeth. Perhaps especially them. A baron you once served wine to had teeth the color of parchment and a breath that could turn cider to vinegar. And yet he laughed and bragged and flirted with reckless abandon. He used a rinse made from rosewater and alcohol, claimed it masked all ills. It didn't, but no one corrected him. That's the other side of it, no matter how foul the mouth. Power grants forgiveness. The poor must clean. The rich must only conceal. Still, there's dignity in effort. You rinse with warm water. gently flavored with a sage leaf you've tucked behind your ear like a charm. The bitterness cuts the sweetness left behind by the honey. Your tongue feels scrubbed, your gums tender, but calm. Somewhere outside, a carriage rattles past. A dog barks. A baby wails into the fog. You sit by the window, watching the lamplighter make his slow, clumsy rounds. His mouth is slightly ajar. You wonder if he brushes, if he's found a mixture that helps, or if he just lets the soot from his trade settle in and call it even. You smile faintly, a private moment of pride. Still yours, still whole, still fighting. Your cheek rests against the cool glass as you let your eyes drift closed for a moment. You dream, briefly, of a time in the far future where small plastic sticks and mint-flavored paste make all of this seem barbaric. But that's their world. Yours is one of sage, salt, charcoal, and clove. One of cracked mirrors and boiling water. One where a clean mouth isn't guaranteed it's earned. Every night, every scrape, you spit into the fire again and watch it sizzle. One last protest before silence. Morning arrives with the subtle grace of a slap. Your eyes open to the sound of a cockerel that lives somewhere it shouldn't, and the smell of damp wool, wet stone, and someone else's breakfast seeping through the walls. You groan softly and run your tongue along your teeth. They feel intact. A bit dry, perhaps, but still anchored. Still yours. That's enough to rise for. Downstairs, the baker has a new kind of biscuit hard as gilt, with raisins baked into craters like sugar-coated fossils. You buy one and chew cautiously on the left side, testing the resilience of your back molars. So far, so good. Afterward, you head toward the river, taking the long way around to avoid the tannery stench. As you pass a street where washerwomen are beating linens against wooden boards, you spot something curious hanging in the breeze. Tooth rags, not laundry, not scraps, actual cloths soaked in salt, vinegar, and herbs, strung up to dry before being reused for scrubbing teeth and gums. You've seen this before, mostly in poorer quarters. Cloth was more plentiful than toothbrushes, and easier to wrap around your finger. Dab it in powder, and suddenly you're doing your dental duty like a court physician. You stop and ask an old woman stirring a pot of mint and basil rinse if she sells the rags pre-soaked. 3 for a penny, she says, and I'll throw in a swish of thyme water if you smile. You smile. She winces. Fair enough. Back home, you hang the rags by the hearth to warm. They smell oddly pleasant green. Sharp. Slightly vinegar sweet. You chew a fennel seed while you wait, letting it crack like a tiny firework between your molars. Tonight, you've decided to try another method you'd heard about from a former stable boy turned novice monk scrubbing with dried rosemary needles bound into a little bundle. Almost like a broom for your teeth. You make one yourself, binding the sprigs with thread and softening them briefly in warm water. It looks a bit ridiculous, but when you drag it gently along your teeth, it feels right. Bristly. Yes, but precise. Cleansing. You imagine the rosemary whispering to the rot. Not today. Historians still argue whether rosemary served more than a symbolic role. It was associated with memory, with protection, even with funerals. Using it to clean the mouth seemed fitting, warding off death one molar at a time. You hum as you scrub, the scent of the herb rising with the heat of the hearth. You can almost convince yourself you're in a garden instead of a city where horses outnumber bathers and rats pay no rent. You spit into the corner bucket, which now contains a mosaic of old rinse water, scraps of mint, and perhaps the soul of a lost clove. You'll empty it later. Maybe. Later in the evening, your neighbor drops by with news of a new tooth cleaning method making the rounds among the wealthier folk mouthstones. You arch an eyebrow. They're smooth little rocks soaked in salt and rose water, he explains. You roll them in your mouth like sweets, cleans the tongue, scours the teeth. You think about it. Then you remember the time a pebble from the street lodged between your teeth and required 4 friends and a pair of tongs to remove. You politely decline. Still, you admire the creativity and the desperation. This is a city of improvisers. No two mouths are cleaned the same way. One man chews lavender bark. Another uses the end of his clay pipe. A young woman you once knew swore by tooth dancing, rhythmic tapping on each tooth with a copper ring while whispering a protective chant. It probably didn't work, but she never had a toothache. Either. You wrap a clean linen rag around your fingertip and dab it into your rosemary paste, this time softened with honey and crushed salt. It glides over your gums like balm, the salt stinging just enough to remind you it's working. You'll sleep well tonight. You've done the work. You spit once more, rinse with warm ale, and sit back as the fire dims. The rosemary bundle, now spent and brittle, crackles faintly in the coals. You're not just cleaning teeth, you're holding the line. As the wind scratches at the window panes and the fire gutters low. You sit in your chair, feet wrapped in a threadbare blanket, hands resting quietly in your lap. Your jaw feels steady tonight. No sharp pangs, no throbs like thunder behind your teeth, just the dull awareness of presence gums, enamel, bone, still intact, still yours. You lean forward slightly, lighting a second candle for better inspection, and hold a polished bit of metal, your makeshift mirror, up to your mouth. It reflects back a glint of yellowed honesty. Not perfect, but nothing in London ever is. Tonight, you're trying something new. A rinse made from boiled nettle root and dried orange peel. An apothecary's apprentice recommended it last week while swiping crumbs from his sleeve and talking far too quickly. He said it was revitalizing, though whether he meant for the teeth or the soul wasn't entirely clear. The mixture smells pungent, like citrus gone rogue. But when you take your first sip and swish it around, it stings just enough to feel like progress. It tastes like burnt marmalade mixed with gravel, but hey, no one said progress would be pleasant. As you gargle, your thoughts drift to an older man you once met at the docks, missing half his teeth but full of advice. Don't just clean your teeth, he said. Scare the rot away. Let it know you mean business. He used mustard seeds, you recall. Chewed them nightly. Claimed the spice made his mouth too hostile for decay. You tried it once, your tongue rebelled. But he had most of his molars at 70. So perhaps there's something in it. You pause to chew a single clove the full pod. Not powdered. It releases that slow burn numbness you've come to associate with safety. You let it sit under your tongue like a secret, just long enough to draw moisture and warm the space behind your teeth. You remember a story from a traveling scribe who claimed Eastern healers believed in toothqui, a life force that resided in the mouth and linked directly to memory. He said brushing with intention could prevent forgetfulness. You're not sure what to make of that, but you've forgotten fewer things since you began scrubbing daily. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe your teeth are better at remembering than your mind. Historians still argue about the deeper beliefs people held about teeth. That they stored personality. That they retained sin. That tooth loss reflected spiritual failure or punishment. It wasn't uncommon for people to bury their extracted teeth, afraid that leaving them out would invite misfortune or allow witches to hex them. You buried your first lost molar under a rosemary bush. You didn't believe in curses, but you didn't not believe either. You run your tongue across the back row. One is slightly loose, you won't touch it. Not yet. It's still holding. Maybe it just wants attention. The fire's quiet now, just coals and the occasional crackle. You reach for the last scrap of your mint sage rag and wipe your teeth one more time. A little ceremony before sleep. Something to reassure yourself and your mouth that you're still doing what you can. Down the street. A cat howls, a baby cries. The city breathes in and exhales the same foul, familiar air. You breathe with it. There's comfort in the routine, in the scraping and the rinsing and the soft sizzle of vinegar against soot. In a world of unpredictability plague. War, fire your nightly ritual as a quiet protest against chaos, a declaration of care. You spit gently into the dying embers, watching the gray fizz vanish like a whisper. And with that, you blow out your candle. No pain, no rot. Not tonight. Just you, your teeth, and the dim satisfaction of having kept them one more day. The candlelight flickers long after midnight as you sit, half drowsing, beside the hearth with your hands curled around a cup of barely warm tea. It's steeped in thyme, rosemary, and a sliver of licorice root, a sleepy brew favored by the apothecary's assistant, who claims it calms the gums and the spirit. You sip slowly. It tastes like someone boiled a forest, but your mouth feels soothed, the way clean sheets soothe the skin. You haven't brushed yet tonight. You're putting it off not from laziness, but from thoughtfulness. You're considering your options. Do you go with the mint-laced vinegar rinse again? Or that slightly suspicious coral chalk your neighbor sold you, which she insists comes from the skeleton of a sacred sea creature? You open the pouch. It smells like crushed pottery and old hope. You close it again. Instead, you reach for your willow twig. You've used it for a week now, frayed the end, softened the fibers, and it's become your companion, like a tiny broom for your mouth. Tonight, though, you sharpen the opposite end with your paring knife and gently pick at something caught between your molars. You dislodge a crumb from supper, something stringy, probably mutton, and sigh with satisfaction. One small victory. That's the thing about dental care in 17th century London you're never trying to win. You're just trying not to lose too much ground. You rinse with warm water and fennel seeds. You chew slowly, letting the oils coat your mouth. And remember a tale told by a traveling merchant, a man with only 3 teeth, but the confidence of 20. Floss with horsehair, he whispered once after too much brandy. But soak it in wine first. You never tried it, but you appreciate the creativity. Historians still debate the existence of true flossing before the 19th century. But threads, strings, hairs, they were used. Not widely, not consistently, but often enough to suggest some awareness that food between the teeth led to trouble. Infection, decay, smells you didn't want to talk about. You sit back, cup resting on your belly, and look over your collection of chewed clove, a spoonful of salt and vinegar, the faithful twig, your cloth, a sprig of mint hanging to dry. Nothing here would be found in a dentist's office centuries from now. But it's all real, all earned. You think of Queen Elizabeth, yes. That Elizabeth who was rumored to have blackened teeth by her final years? Some claimed it was from sugar, others from the thick white makeup she used, which may have rotted her skin from the outside in. You never saw her, of course, but you heard things. Stories passed from mouths barely able to chew anymore. Royal or rat catcher, everyone's teeth met the same end if neglected. You decide finally to use the sage paste. It's coarse and stings like gossip, but you trust it. You rub it along your molars with a square of cloth wrapped tight around your finger. There's something rhythmic about the motion. Left, right, up, down. A slow sweep through time. Your grandmother used to say, "Clean teeth carry a clean soul." You suspect she was trying to get children to stop eating soot. But the phrase stuck. You dab your gums with a drop of clove oil and let the familiar warmth settle. It's a little like prayer now, ritual, repetition, quietness. Each night, this process becomes less about avoiding rot and more about reclaiming something. Dignity, maybe, or just peace. You spit gently into the fire. The hiss it gives is softer tonight, almost approving. Outside, the streets have hushed. No carriages, no shouting. Just the soft shuffle of the watchman and the faint clink of horseshoes over stone. You lean back and close your eyes. No new pain. No sharp edges. Just a clean tongue, a warm mouth, and the slow awareness that you've kept something sacred alive for another day. Your smile isn't white. It isn't straight. But it's yours. Still here. Still strong. And that, in this city, is a kind of miracle. You awake before dawn to the gentle, awful sound of someone retching in the alley. A rough welcome to the day, but a common one. You rise slowly, jaw working as you test your bite. No new tenderness. No sudden shift. Your teeth are still holding their line. For now, the hearth is cold, the air sharp. You wrap your shawl tighter and sit down beside your window, breathing in the peculiar smell of 17th century London morning coal smoke. Boiled onions, damp wool, and something faintly fishy that probably has nothing to do with fish. You begin your morning ritual. First, the rinse warm water infused with thyme and a pinch of salt. You swish gently, then spit into the bowl by your chair. Next, a cautious run of the willow twig along your gum line. You've worn the twig down to a fine fan shape, and its bristles now slide smoothly against your teeth like a broom that remembers better floors. You catch a glint of sunlight through the gray and think back to a story. An old midwife once told you how some believe the sun itself could cure toothache if you opened your mouth to its first light each morning. You tried it once, got a moth in the back of your throat, didn't try again. Still, it's charming. The idea that light could cleanse. There's a new rumor going around. 2 crushed oyster shells mixed with lemon peel and goat's milk. A noble's wife supposedly used it twice daily, and her teeth were like ivory gates. You doubt it. Goat's milk sours quick, and oyster shell sounds like the wrong sort of crunch. But you're curious. You chew a sprig of dried mint instead. Safer, simpler. and easier on the conscience. It crackles between your teeth, releasing a coolness that lifts the fog from your tongue. You breathe deeply, mouth open, and feel almost civilized. Across the way, your neighbor leans out her window and waves her cleaning cloth like a flag. You raise your teacup in return. She shouts something about sage boiled in vinegar and how it cured her cousin's bleeding gums. You nod like you haven't heard the same story 6 times. Historians still argue whether vinegar truly helped with oral hygiene or merely gave people the sensation of doing something. Its acidic bite could scour surfaces, but it could also wear them down. There are letters from physicians warning against it, and others praising its purity. London doesn't choose sides. It just tries everything at once. You remember the baker's boy who used to gargle with beer? Claim the yeast kept the worms away. Worms. In this case, being the legendary culprits of tooth decay. They were thought to wiggle deep inside the teeth, causing pain as they fed. You don't believe it, exactly, but on nights when your molars throb, it's hard not to imagine something alive in there. Tooth worms, demon rot, whispering decay. You pick up your goose quill toothpick and carefully prod at a space between your back teeth. There's something lodged yesterday's fig. Perhaps, or a bit of crust from the hard biscuit you shouldn't have eaten. You flick it free, feeling a gentle snap of relief. One more threat removed. You once heard a physician speak of saliva as nature's toothbrush. He recommended chewing hard foods to stimulate the flow carrots. Apples, even old bread. You wonder how many people followed his advice versus simply nodding and going back to chewing bones. Tonight, you prepare a new rinse rose water and a few drops of clove oil, thinned with ale. It smells like a fancy funeral, but it soothes. You hold the cup to your lips and swirl the liquid thoughtfully. This city tests you. Every day. Every night. The air conspires to stain your breath, the food to lodge in your teeth, the grind of daily life to wear down everything you are. And yet, you resist. You scrape. You scrub. You pick. You rinse. You fight the rot with rituals, with powdered sage and scraped coral, with twigs and vinegar and little pouches of mint tied with string. You've never seen a dentist's office, never heard of a toothbrush with bristles set in bone. You don't know what fluoride is, but you do know the value of keeping your teeth one day longer than you thought you could. You spit gently into the fire, the rinse sizzling like applause. And as the embers crackle, you smile. Tonight, the wind howls like a sermon, loud and dramatic, shaking shutters and rattling thoughts loose from their corners. You've just returned from the tavern, where you nursed a cup of thin ale, half listened to a fiddler who thought he was better than he was, and watched a man lose a bet and a tooth in the same sentence. It was a front incisor. It came out clean, with a popping sound that made everyone wince. He laughed it off, stuffed a kerchief into the gap, and asked for more stew. Londoners are like that. Practical, bloody, a little unhinged. You're grateful your teeth stayed in place. Back home, you warm your hands by the fire, swish a bit of warm salt water around your mouth, and begin tonight's routine. You start with a cloth dabbed in honey and fine ground salt, not for sweetness, but to soothe. The mixture sticks to your teeth, and you press your tongue against it gently. It's not pleasant, but it reminds you that you're still fighting the good fight. The cloth tonight is new, Linen from an old undershirt, soaked earlier in mint tea and hung to dry by the fire. It smells clean. A rare gift. As you rub your teeth, you remember the butcher's wife who claimed her family cleaned with ashes and pig's fat. Said it kept the shine. You never tried it. You weren't sure if it was a cleaning method or a marinade. There's a jar on your shelf, earthenware, chipped, sealed with wax. Inside, the last of your powdered coral. You've been saving it for something. Not a special occasion, this isn't cake, but for when the ache returned. Tonight, there's no ache. Just a lingering tenderness, like a memory trying to claw its way back. So you open the jar, take a pinch, and tap it onto your tongue. It tastes like salt, chalk, and vanity. Coral powder was expensive. Still is. Imported. Crushed. And sold to people who believed the sea's ancient bones could somehow preserve their own. Historians still debate whether it did anything more than strip the enamel and lighten the breath. But you don't mind. Tonight, you'll believe in it. You rinse with a splash of ale and rosewater. Your breath smells like a medieval love letter. You think that might be the nicest thing anyone said about your mouth in months. As you sit back, you think about the strange social currency of teeth. Smiles are a kind of armor, or maybe an invitation. People trust clean mouths. They flirt with them. They remember them. Rotten teeth, on the other hand, tell stories you don't want told. In court, a nobleman's bad breath could become court gossip faster than any affair. You heard about a duke who stuffed his mouth with lavender petals before every audience. He called it perfuming the palace. He also lost 5 teeth in 1 year. In the poorer districts, the rituals are more sincere, less vanity, more survival. You've seen people scrub with charcoal and cloth, not because they want to sparkle, but because they can't afford another infection. Another funeral. You once helped a neighbor boil water and dried sage leaves, then watched as she strained it into a cup and poured it carefully over her husband's aching jaw. He didn't flinch, just smiled, lopsided, and said it was better than what the barber-surgeon offered, a pair of iron tongs and a warning. You reach for your mint sprig, half wilted, but still aromatic, and chew it slowly. It tastes tired, but still useful. Like you, as you clean the edges of your mouth, you find a small cut near your back. Molar. Probably from the crust of bread 2 days ago. You dab it with a bit of vinegar and whisper something rude. The pain flares, then fades. You smile through it. You glance out the window and see the lamplighter making his way down the street, lifting his flame to the iron cages. A little light in the darkness. A little hope, flickering against the fog. You wonder what he does for his teeth. If he has a pouch of cloves, if he rinses with gin, if he bothers at all. You sit back, jaw soft, breath tinged with herbs and alcohol, and feel a kind of peace. Not because your mouth is perfect. It isn't. But because it's cared for, tended, defended, and that, in this city, is enough. The rain comes heavy tonight. Thick drops slapping the window panes like they're owed money. You pull your chair closer to the fire, wrapping your blanket around your shoulders and cradling your jaw in one hand. No ache tonight, just the memory of past ones, hovering like ghosts behind your molars. Your eyes scan your little dental altar on the table frayed linen, the ever-loyal willow twig, a cloth-wrapped bundle of mint, a jar of powdered sage, and a modest bottle of clove oil. All of it humble, all of it earned. You take a moment before beginning. It's not procrastination, it's reverence. You start with the clove oil, just a drop rubbed into your gum line. The sting is familiar, comforting in a way. Like returning to a prayer you've recited so often it hums beneath your breath, even when silent. Clove oil's power lies not only in its numbing properties, but in its scent. Warm, deep, almost medicinally holy. You can understand why some call it the priest of the mouth. You follow with a rinse time water, cooled beside the fire, steeped long enough to be bitter. You swish gently, letting the flavor coat your tongue. Then, as always, you spit into the hearth. The hiss it gives back feels like dialogue. Tonight, you're trying something new again. A tiny piece of deer antler scraped thin and smoothed, gifted to you by a traveling tanner who claimed it made the best natural polisher known to man or beast. You don't know if he was mad or marketing, possibly both. You wet the antler in warm vinegar and rub it along your front teeth. It glides gently, not unpleasantly, and you imagine it scraping away weeks of bread crust and tavern stew. The taste is mild, the pressure soothing. Historians still argue whether tools like this were actually used or are simply romantic fictions of survival. But when you're desperate for something, anything that gives the illusion of control, even antler becomes a toothbrush. You stop after a few minutes, not wanting to overdo it. Enamel is finite, and you've no plans to swap your real teeth for wooden ones anytime soon. You sit back, breathing through your nose, letting the herb-scented air calm your senses. Across the room, your clay cup waits with its nightly blend rosehip tea and a splash of old gin. A strange pairing, but one that settles your stomach and your nerves. You remember a midwife who once swore by rubbing mashed garlic on the gums to prevent decay of the inner life. You tried it. Once, the taste lingered for a week. No, thank you. You prefer gentler methods, like chewing fennel or rinsing with cooled milk infused with crushed mint. That one surprised you. It left your mouth feeling smooth, like polished stone. Tonight, you end with your trusty twig. The willow's frayed end is softer now, more like a brush than a stick. You run it along the inside of your bottom teeth, patient and slow, the way a scribe smooths ink onto a page. It's not about scrubbing anymore. It's about rhythm, ritual. You once met a priest who said that all good habits begin in the mouth prayer, song, nourishment, and that cleaning the mouth was as holy as cleansing the soul. He had bad teeth, but he made a point. Outside, thunder growls low like an angry god. The wind howls through the eaves, and a shutter somewhere down the lane bangs loose. You wrap the blanket tighter, spit your last rinse into the fire, and watch the sparks scatter. There's something poetic in this nightly act, in the battle between time and teeth, in the way you claw back just a bit of dignity each evening with sage, salt, and spit. Your teeth may not be white, may not be straight, but they are cared for, and in a city where even the river forgets how to be clean. That's no small feat. You lean your head back, smile faintly at the ceiling, and whisper a quiet thank you to the herbs, the fire, the stubborn roots of your molars. Still holding, still yours. The storm has passed. You wake to the faint glow of dawn slicing through a crack in the shutters. The kind of light that makes even the soot-stained walls seem gentle for a moment. Your mouth feels balanced. That's the best word for it. Not fresh, not flawless, but calm. You move your jaw side to side. No pain, no protest, just the quiet acknowledgement of survival. You rise slowly and begin what might be your last ritual of the week. The fire's down to coals. The hearth is cool. The bowl of rinse water has gone tepid. You dip your finger into a paste you made yesterday, sage, salt, and a touch of vinegar, and begin rubbing it along your gums with a piece of cloth so soft it could have been silk once. It tingles slightly, then settles into that soothing, earthy numbness you've come to rely on. There's no rush tonight. Each motion is deliberate. You're not just brushing, you're remembering. Remembering every clove you chewed, every tooth you spared the barber-surgeon's forceps, every time you chose mint leaves over silence or a willow twig over surrender. You rinse with warm ale, swish twice, and spit gently into the coals. They hiss one last time, like an exhale. And you sit back. Tonight, you reflect on all the strange, sometimes ridiculous, sometimes inspired things you've tried. Crushed bones, charcoal, wig powder, vinegar, fennel seeds, even that awful goat milk oyster shell idea you thankfully never followed through on. You think of the people who gave you advice: the midwife with garlic, the tanner with deer antler, the apothecary's assistant with his mossy brews, the boy who believed in beer gargles, the priest who saw salvation in the mouth. You think of your own reflection, the not quite white teeth, still yours, and you think, maybe that care matters more than perfection. Historians will still argue about what worked. Maybe the vinegar did more harm than good. Maybe the charcoal was too rough. Maybe the clove oil masked symptoms but didn't cure. But you'll know one thing for certain. You tried. You tended your teeth like a garden in a city full of smoke. You held the line. You resisted decay with cloth and conviction, with little more than scraps and stubbornness. And that's worth something. You sip the last of your mint tea and breathe deeply through your nose. Your mouth feels clean. Not modern clean, not dentist clean, but old, human, London clean. And with that, you rise, extinguish your candle, and step into the quiet. The streets are still. The air is damp, but kind. Somewhere a bell tolls 7, and you'll face the day with your mouth held steady, your smile earned and your teeth crooked. Yes, but yours intact. So now, with your body settled and your breath soft, let's slow everything down. Let your jaw hang loose. Just a little. Let the muscles in your face relax, not forced, not held, just gently melting into comfort. Your gums are quiet now. Your tongue rests against the roof of your mouth. The taste of herbs, of warmth, of care lingers, but only faintly, like memory. Feel the weight of your head as it sinks deeper into your pillow, and the way your spine slowly releases its grip on the day. There's nothing more to do. You've brushed, you've rinsed, you've scrubbed and spat and soothed. Let that quiet pride settle into your chest. The work is done. And beyond the fire, beyond the clove and sage and vinegar, there's a deeper kind of peace, the kind that doesn't need mint or perfection or approval, just breath. just rest, just presence. So let the world fade now. Let the sounds soften. Let your thoughts, if they come, come gently, like slow footsteps on rain-washed cobblestones. You are clean. You are still. You are held in the quiet hush of a world that has at last gone to sleep. And so should you. Good night.